So he's got a crowd of people, Pharisees, kind of the normal folk, just a bunch of people around him. And again, they appear to be divided. So what he's doing is he's taking this opportunity to take a jab at the religious leaders who are really kind of falling in their job of being shepherds. We'll talk about that a little bit later. It's a very philosophical, poetic jab. Some are confused, but he's using this imagery of a shepherd, something that they all would have been familiar with in their time, right? They all would have known what this idea of a shepherd looks like. But I want to just kind of update us on this idea of a shepherd, because maybe we just kind of, we picture somebody in a field with a cane, and that's correct. But again, they would have been very familiar. So small villages had shepherds, kind of had one shepherd that was probably watching multiple flocks of sheep, because not everyone could afford just to hire one shepherd. So the shepherd was known to the family. He was known to the doorkeeper, and he was, most importantly, he was known to the sheep. Right? He would have been somebody that would have been familiar. There was maybe 6-foot walls around their sheepfold, around their pen. And he would walk up to the door. Doorkeeper would recognize him, let him in. He would whistle, or he would sing, or he would say something, and the sheep would know his voice. And as clearly as Jesus is saying it, if you weren't that shepherd, you're not going to be allowed in the doorkeep. Therefore, you have to climb over the walls, and the sheep are not going to recognize you. They're going to see you as an enemy. So that's the role of the shepherd. Their purpose, to sum it up, is to daily feed, nurture, guide, lead, provide, and protect the flock. That is a common understanding amongst everybody listening to Jesus, that is the role of the shepherd, much like we would try to describe a firefighter. Everyone's on the same page as to what a firefighter is. These that are listening understand what a shepherd is. So no one's going to challenge the thought in regards to that, somebody being a shepherd to sheep. But now, again, classic Jesus, he's flipping the script and he's saying, I am the good shepherd to you. And not only that, but those that have come before me, for example, the people in this crowd that are doubting me, the religious leaders that are coming after me, that are trying to sway you guys to kill me, they are coming only to steal, kill, and destroy. See, the religious leaders often were led with an ulterior motive, right? They wanted power, they wanted money, they wanted notoriety. They weren't here for us, they weren't here for the other people, they were there for them. But Jesus saying, I am the good shepherd, and I am here to guide you, I am here to lead you, I am here to protect you. So we've referenced these I am statements before. There's 7 I am statements in the book of John, and Jesus actually says 2 of them in this passage. In verse 7, I am the door of the sheep. In verse 14, where we're focusing today, he says, I am the good shepherd. So our big idea, what I want to spend some time talking about, is that if you don't choose your shepherd, if you're not intentional about what's leading you, about what's guiding you, it's going to choose you. Right? It's not if I want to be shepherded or if I choose to, something is going to influence us. Something is going to lead us. Something is going to guide us. So the question is, we are going to be shepherded, but the question is by who or by what? So your notes should have 4 shepherds, shepherd 1, 2, 3, and 4. We're going to look at 4 different types of shepherds in our life and what that looks like. The first one, the world as my shepherd. So when we're talking about the world, we're looking at the culture, the customs, the movements of society, right? Frankly, I have trouble seeing this be relevant today, right? There's no way, shape, or form is there anything, any ideology, any faction, any side, any party. Nothing is constantly trying to influence us, right? Pretty outdated shepherd, if you ask me. I work in the youth ministry, and I was a middle schooler back, early 2000s. High schooler, graduated 07, and I look at the high schoolers today in our student ministry and I say, man, it was tough for me, but I cannot imagine what you are going through today, what you are attempted to be influenced by, what is pulling at you, what is tugging at you. There is something that is constantly trying to influence us, whether for the good or for the bad. They're being just oversaturated with all these different types of influences. Now, we are going to talk as the world as our shepherd. Spoiler alert, this is not one of the good shepherds, but I do want to make a disclaimer, somebody coming in that maybe is a little newer, that not every aspect in this world around us is terrible, right? Austin and I were talking about this, and he worded it really well. He said, there are parts of society that are still clinging on to God's truth. Also, I want to note that God, in his sovereignty, is not defeated by the world. There are still aspects of this world that God can use for good. We see it all the time, right? Things that can be intended for evil, God can still use for good. But what I want to talk on specifically is those things that are trying to lead us, trying to influence us, trying to guide us, trying to take our hearts. 2 Corinthians 4 says this in verse 4, it's Satan, who is the god of this world, has blinded the minds of those who don't believe. They are unable to see the glorious light of the good news. They don't understand this message about the glory of Christ, who is the exact likeness of God. So Satan is the ruler of the world that we live in. Another passage, 1 John 2, 15 through 17, reading the Passion Translation. Don't set the affections of your heart on this world or in loving the things of the world. The love of the Father and the love of the world are incompatible. For all that the world can offer us, the gratification of our flesh, the allurement of things of the world, the obsession with status and importance, none of these things come from the Father but from the world. The world and its desires are in the process of passing away, but those who love to do the will of God will live forever. So oftentimes at church we can say, hey, don't do this, the world's bad, don't follow the world, right? But for me, I think I need things laid out a little bit more kind of clearly for me, kind of explain it to me like I'm 5 kind of situation. So there's the path of the world and the path of God, right? And things that come from God, they are life-giving, right? They are eternal, like they are pointing us towards the redemption that is offered by Jesus Christ, right? If you are following the path of the Lord, it is a life-giving path that is constantly pointing us towards the life and the redemption that Jesus gives us. Well, the things of the world, they are just quite literally, they are temporary. And I was thinking about this. From the moment the desires of the world are conceived, they begin rotting, right? There's a countdown to them dying. They begin to go away. They are temporary. They are not pointing us towards the redemption of Jesus, which means they're not pointing us in a manner that will love others, that will love God, right? That will care for others. It's pointing at yourself. It's pointing at your flesh, right? It's pointing at these selfish desires. So that translation of 1 John says it perfectly, right? The world and its desires are in the process of passing away, right? If you're hopping on that, you're hopping on a wagon that is eventually going to crash. It is going to pass away. It is going to rot away. So the things of this world are temporary. So the moral of the story when navigating this world is that we have to be intentional about the narratives that we allow to shape us. I'm in a life group with somebody, and it's pretty interesting. He loves fellowship, right? He loves the idea of coming together with believers, this idea of life groups, kind of a quiet plug for life groups. But he does personally have a problem with maybe organized religion, organized church. But with that, he said something very insightful. He said, I challenged myself 25 years ago. I challenged myself to sit down with the Bible. And there was this process, and he said the process took quite a while. Try to empty my mind of any possible influence that has allowed me, that has structured how I read the Bible, right? How somebody told me to read the Bible, or the news, or other influencers. He said, I tried to eradicate that from my mind and simply read the Bible for what it is. And he said that was something that he's been doing, and it took him like a year to be able to get to that. So we have to be wise about the narratives that shape us. We're going to talk about a few more of those tactics later on with our third shepherd, but we're getting to our second shepherd now, and that is me, the flesh as my shepherd. Following myself. When I think about following myself, I think of the movement of individualism, right? I got it on my own, right? I can do everything myself. The Gospel Coalition identified 4 slogans that could define, if you're not kind of familiar, 4 slogans that would define this idea of individualism. You, be true to yourself, follow your heart, find yourself. Read this excerpt from a book called The Fractured Republic. It said that term, individualism, suggests not only a desire to pursue one's own path, but also a yearning for fulfillment through the definition and articulation of one's own identity. It is a drive both to be more like whatever you already are and also to live in a society by fully asserting who you are. Right? Be your own guide, be your own leader, be your own boss, be more of who you are. And I'm sorry, I look at me before Jesus, or I look at me without Jesus, without all the tough love that I've received from fellow believers. I was like, I don't want more of that, right? That was kind of pathetic, right? Like I don't want more of that. Now, some of us don't need to be saved from culture. Some of you guys are like, listen, I get it, Tim. This world around us is wild, it's rotting, but I feel like I got a pretty good solid core of where, what I'm influenced by. I got a good rhythm with the Lord. We're great. Some of us don't have a problem with being influenced by the world. But maybe where we do struggle is that we need to be saved from ourselves. We try to, maybe it's a lack of trust for just literally anything else. You're saying, man, the only person I can trust is myself. But at some point, we're going to realize we can't. Romans 8:6, the mind governed by the flesh is death, but the mind governed by the Spirit is life in peace. There are studies that show that kind of in our brain, our choices are influenced by subliminal cues that we don't realize, right? There's a big list of them. Our parents, the era we were born in, our origin, family dynamics, who our friends were in high school, who they were in college, the sports you played, where you've traveled. The list goes on and on and on and on. And sometimes we think that we are making these independent decisions, but in fact, they are being influenced by several other things. Sorry, talking's hard in the morning. And I'm reminded by Paul's challenge to the Corinthians. And this is one of those verses where I think I read, and kind of, oh, cool verse, heard it 100 times. But then you stop and think about what it's actually calling us to do. And I'm just like, that's a lot of work, right? He encourages the Corinthians, take every thought captive, right? Verse 5 of 2 Corinthians 10, we demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. Now, I'm a visual learner, and so what I'm hearing from there is, imagine there's this room in your brain, right? Like an input, output. A thought comes in this room, we close the doors, we analyze it, we ask ourselves questions. Does this point to God? What does Scripture say about this thought? Does this thought or this action, does it reflect the gospel? Ask yourself a few of those questions. And then if it's good, it can go out the door. If it's bad, it gets discarded. But for me, sometimes I feel like that room in my brain, the thought capture chamber, just open doors all day and thoughts are like, choo, 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 choo. Everything's going through, right? Because it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to sit there and be like, all right, take every thought captive. I'm like, hey, God, what do you think about like 1 in 25. Like I'll take one, like I'll kind of do a random baggage check if we're good there, right? Just to, right? And God's like, no, every thought. That's a lot of work. But to think about the cost, those thoughts I'm letting through, they could be laying seeds to a lot more destructive, cancerous thoughts in my mind. So we're to take every thought captive. Now, all of us at some point are at least going to be tempted. And please hear me out. I'm not saying this is all happening to all of us, but we're all at some point going to be tempted. And I think more than ever the last 2 years, you talk about not being able to trust things. The only person I trusted in the news was the weatherman, who told us it was going to snow today, and then we're out there roasting in the sun. So there's definitely this temptation that, like, I can only trust me, and we will stray away. We almost throw the baby out with the bathwater. We throw out the things that God's trying to teach us with the things that everyone else is trying to teach us. But I'm reminded, and I'm just so overwhelmed when I think of Jesus' response to those of us that stray away, to those of us that get lost, right? I know if I'm trying to guide somebody and they walk away, I'm just like, you're gonna get what you deserve. Like I gave you plenty of opportunities. But in Luke, I'm reminded of what the story that Jesus says. He says, if a man, and you guys probably know it, has 100 sheep and one of them gets lost, what does he do? Won't he leave the 99 others in the wilderness and go search for the one that's lost? Now this is awesome. Verse 5. And when he has found it, does he give it a backhand? Does he kick it? No, it says he will joyfully carry it home on his shoulders. And when he arrives, he will call together his friends and neighbors and publicly shame it? No, rejoice with me because I have found my lost sheep. So I'm reminded, even though we are tempted to stray away, that Jesus joyfully carries us home and rejoices when we have been found. So if we don't choose our shepherd, the world fights to be our shepherd, our flesh fights for our soul, but the third and final bad option, I would say, is the devil as my shepherd. Now, I'm hoping that none of you are sitting here and be like, I want the devil to shepherd me, right? Like, I hope none of you are doing that. You got a goat's head on a post in your house. Like, if so, Pastor Austin's in the back room. Love to talk to you. Actually, I think he's not there anymore. Yeah, none of us are truly, if you're a believer, none of you are saying, all right, the devil needs to be my shepherd. But I'm reminded that as the world is sneaky, as our flesh can be sneaky, like Satan is the chief deceiver, right? He's the king of lies. He's the father of lies. Back when we went through chapter 8, which feels like it was a while ago, there was this back and forth between Jesus and the religious leaders. And he says this in 8:44, you are the children of your father, the devil, and you love to do the evil things he does. He was a murderer from the beginning. He has always hated the truth because there is no truth in him. When he lies, it is consistent with his character, for he is a liar and the father of lies. He is the king of deception. And this is where I think Satan is incredibly, if I'm going to say talented, in what he does in deceiving us. And he tries to destroy us from within. That's why I love in the armor of God, the thing that is represented by faith is the shield, right? The shield is what stops the flaming arrows, because that's what Satan's doing. He's trying to fire these arrows of lies at us, right? You're not good enough. Jesus doesn't want you. Jesus wouldn't die for you. You're terrible. Like all these things, he's firing these arrows of lies at us. And I love that they say, take up the shield of faith, reminding who our hope is truly set in to combat those arrows of lies. There have been seasons where Satan is just running circles around us, right? And he's, as enemy would try to do in battle, he's going to try and destroy you from within and then separate you from everyone else, right? Isolate and destroy. One of you is a lot easier to destroy than 10 of you, than 100 of you. So he can be leading us before we realize it, and he is leading us directly off the cliff. I kind of want to, in battle, which I've never been in battle, but from my understanding, one of the tactics is to know your enemy, to know how they're going to fight, because you can start identifying things a lot easier. So I want to go through a few things, kind of identify what the voice of the enemy, what the voice of Satan will look like in our life. I forget, there might be a slide, I don't remember, but the enemy's voice, he's going to fill us with anxiety, with fear, with shame, with worry and insecurity. And he's going to tell you that you constantly need to live in this state of worry and anxiety. Now, hear me out. We're all going to be afraid at some point. We're all going to have a fear. I have been tempted to live in fear for the last 8 months, right? And this is maybe a little darker, but when I'm getting ready to lay Clara down to bed, there's all these fears that go through my head. But it's when he has gotten us to live in a life that is motivated, that is powered by these things, that we begin to be shepherded by him. The enemy's voice, he's going to drive us and entice us, right? To this point where we feel like we need to sin. That we need that to fill our cup. And this is where he's really good, right? We let's say our hearts have this cup that needs to be filled. And obviously we want Jesus to fill it. And when he fills it, he overflows. But for Satan, what he does, there's a hole in the bottom of the cup. And so he fills it and then it leaks. And we think we need it filled again. And he fills it and it leaks. And we start pursuing these sinful things because we think that they are going to fill the cup, and they never do. But his voice will drive us and entice us to those things. And then the third thing is he is going to lead us down a path where we feel aggravated and confused about God. He's going to try and change. That's the ultimate thing. If he can flip you, right? If he can make you not believe the things, the promises that God has, if he can destroy those promises in your heart, then he's going to be shepherding you. So his voice will make you question God, that God can't be trusted. God's not good. Again, those are things that we are going to face. But it's when we really start believing it where we start being shepherded by him. Heck, I think even Jonah, who followed God, right? He questioned God, but it was out of this intense relationship that he had with God that he was questioning him. He knew exactly who the character of God was, and that's why he was frustrated as he was processing some of his own stuff. But Satan is going to lead you to divisive thoughts, not only about God, but about those around you, about those others in your flock. Again, he says, the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. Nothing sounds great about that. But I want to read John 10 all the way through, or verse 10 all the way through. He says, but I have come that they may have life and have it to the fullest. So we go to our last shepherd. And if you guessed it, if you've been in church long enough, you know I'm not going to leave you on too much of a sour note, right? Last shepherd is Jesus as our shepherd. What I love, before I kind of get into the heart of Jesus, what I love is that Jesus, he's not outdated, right? We see in this story, and we see in our life, he was very familiar with the culture. He's talking to all these people about this idea of a shepherd, literally in their backyard, right? Something they would have been familiar with. This vocation that nobody really would have had to sit there and be like, hey, Siri, what's a shepherd, right? He met them where they were at. So my encouragement is that is something that Jesus is still doing today in our life. He's not saying, hey, get up here on this hill so I can teach you. He's meeting us exactly where we are at so that he can show us who he is. So it's a little nugget there, but now we look at Jesus as our shepherd. Now, I teased this a little earlier, but the disciples would have been shocked when they hear that Jesus is saying, I am the good shepherd, right? They would have been shocked because shepherds spent so much time with their sheep. They knew everything about them, right? They were just bonded. They knew when they were sick, when they were injured, when they were pregnant, when they were thirsty. They had names for them, right? The sheep knew them. They knew the sheep. I wouldn't be surprised if there were shepherds that just kind of constantly slept out in the fields with their sheep. They just had a very personal relationship with their sheep. So when Jesus is saying this, when he's saying, I am the good shepherd, what people are hearing is, I want to truly know who you are. Not, I want your money, or I want the notoriety, or I want you to follow me. I want a personal, intimate relationship with each and every one of you. Out of all the I am statements, this one, the I am the good shepherd, actually shows how much care and how much daily care that Jesus wants to have for us in our lives. How much he wants to lead us and guide us and protect us. And again, the image of a shepherd is an extremely important biblical picture of the leadership that Jesus has in our lives. Because from my understanding, the term leadership actually comes from this imagery of a shepherd, to where the shepherd is not going to lead from behind. They're not cracking the whip, right? A shepherd's job was to actually go before the sheep, go encounter any obstacles that they might face so that they know how to navigate the sheep in their life. So they are going before to address the issues, to advocate for the sheep, and then come back and lead them proactively. So by calling himself a shepherd, he is saying, I want to take daily responsibility for caring for you, for guiding you, for directing you. And not only that, I'm not going to do this half-heartedly. If you follow me, you're going to get life. You're going to get it to the fullest. Now, keep in mind, he's sharing this in the midst of these religious leaders who are supposed to do just that. Right? These religious leaders, these Pharisees, they were supposed to be the trusted shepherds of the people. That was literally their job, governing them in kindness and grace and gentleness. But instead, they're deceiving, they're shaming, they're swindling, right? Spiritual abuse is happening. And he's not huddling people around the corner and be like, all right, those guys are bad, I'm the good shepherd. No, they are in the crowd, I wouldn't be surprised if there was some finger pointing, but they were in the crowd. He's saying, I am the good shepherd. Anyone who came before you, yeah, I'm talking about you, and you, to these religious leaders, anyone who comes before you is here to kill, steal, and destroy. So he is calling them out while telling the listeners who he is. And this is another reminder. Jesus, he entered directly into the destruction and the corruption that was going on to rescue the people. And he will enter in. He's not waiting outside like, clean yourself up, get out of danger, and then come to me. He's going to enter directly in to our mess, to whatever we are in, to let us know who he is. And that is the good shepherd. Verse 27, he says, in chapter 10, he says, my sheep listen to my voice, I know them, and they follow me. Again, these sheep would have known his voice. I was reading this commentary, and this guy recalled he had two pictures in his head of some moments when he traveled to Jerusalem, and they were super cool. He says this, of the two pictures, one is that of a shepherd leading a sheep through the city of Jerusalem just outside the Jaffa Gate. Cars were whizzing by while the shepherd sang and gently whistled to his sheep, and they dutifully followed him despite all the bustling traffic. The other picture is that of an early morning when the shepherds began to lead their sheep out of the sheepfold, which continued to combine the flocks of 4 shepherds. As each shepherd took his turn and began to sing and call the sheep, they dutifully separated from the larger flock and began to follow to the hills for their daylight feeding. So my prayer today as we kind of wrap things up is that we will continue to read about, to understand, to seek the voice of the Good Shepherd, the voice of Jesus, be able to separate and distinguish the difference between him, the world, our own flesh, the devil, that we would continue to seek after his voice. Again, verse 10, he says, the thief's purpose, kill, steal, and destroy. My purpose is to give a rich and satisfying life. The Greek word there means that which goes beyond necessity. So again, he's not just going to kind of fill our cup. He's going to satisfy our hearts beyond our wildest dreams. So today, something I kind of like to do is I call Brian back up. I want to read some scripture over us. Psalm 23, a very popular psalm that speaks to Jesus being our shepherd. I just want to read this over us as we end our time and we just think about what that looks like in our own personal life. So if you could just bow your heads and listen to Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd. I have all that I need. He lets me rest in green meadows. He leads me beside peaceful streams. He renews my strength. He guides me along right paths, bringing honor to his name. Even when I walk through the darkest valley, I will not be afraid, for you are close beside me. Your rod and your staff protect and comfort me. You prepare a feast for me in the presence of my enemies. You honor me by anointing my head with oil. My cup overflows with blessing. Surely your goodness and unfailing love will pursue me all the days of my life, and I will live in the house of the Lord forever. Amen.